The other day, I was talking to one of my friends and I noticed they had some gray hairs. Naturally, I panicked because we were still shy of 20. Did aging really hit that fast? Was I already on my way to the grave? How can I live longer? So I went to YouTube and Google to start looking for ways to increase my lifespan. And I read a lot of promises about how something called a telomere was going to reverse my aging and help me live longer. What is a telomere, and is it true that they are the cure for aging? So, today, I tracked down a telomere specialist scientist. So, today, I'm going to go meet with a scientist in the biology department at Vanderbilt University to explain to me what a telomere is, if we know it'll make me live longer, and what's going on with her research.
I'm Kathy Friedman. I'm a biologist, primarily a geneticist, and I'm in the biological sciences department at Vanderbilt University.
Thinking back to my search results, I immediately asked if she knew her research was in the news.
I have heard that in the popular press, which is exciting for me since that's what I work on. So telomeres are the very ends of the chromosomes. So each of our chromosomes is one very long DNA molecule, but they're linear, which means that they have an end. And the ends turn out to be a little challenging for the cell, and so they are a specialized structure that helps protect the end of the chromosome.
The way I like to think about it is that telomeres are like shoelace aglets, the little plastic things that protect all the wonderful shoelace in the middle, except instead of plastic protectors, they are long stretches of repetitive DNA that protects all the important genes in the middle. They can also shrink over the whole of a lifespan, but why would the ends of our DNA be shrinking? Well, let me break it down. DNA has two similar strands that run anti-parallel. This means that the strands run beside each other, but moving in opposite directions. Instead of arrows, we can tell these strands are opposites because one has an OH pointing out towards the end of the DNA, and the other has an OH on the other side. DNA is only made from wherever an OH is present. We call one strand leading and the other strand lagging. The leading strand has an OH molecule pointing towards the end of DNA, so the leading strand will create DNA going towards the end. The lagging strand does not have this OH pointing towards the end, which means that DNA cannot be made in that direction. So, we put something at the end called the primer to start building lagging strand in the opposite anti-parallel direction close to the end of the DNA. But this primer goes away and leaves the landing strand not as long as the leading strand. So, each time DNA divides again, DNA gets shorter. Don't freak out though. Telomeres are generally long enough to last a lifetime, and there are systems in the body that keep extending the telomeres of your DNA so they don't simply run out in your quickly replicating cells. So, again, what's the link between these DNA aglets and aging though?
So one of the reasons that we think that telomeres are associated with aging is, first of all, that we do lose telomeres as we get older. So every time our cells divide, they actually lose a little bit of DNA from the end of the chromosome. And the telomeres provide a buffer zone against that loss, but eventually, as with any buffer, that buffer will disappear, and that can become problematic. So my grandmother's telomeres are shorter than my own. But the other reason that we think telomeres are associated with aging is that we know that there are people whose telomeres are unusually short, typically because they have a disease that prevents their telomeres from being maintained correctly. And in that case, people do in fact suffer from diseases that are often associated with aging.
Wow. So it's important to invest and think about research involving telomeres. Here's what Dr. Friedman said about the work done in her lab on campus relating to telomeres.
So my lab actually uses yeast. It's the same species that we use to bake bread and to brew beer. And it's been proven over and over that many of the mechanisms that we can work out in yeast are going to turn out to be applicable in human cells, but it's easier to manipulate the genome and to do experiments in yeast. It's fast, and I never feel guilty about bleaching them and throwing them down the sink at the end of my experiment. When a chromosome breaks, then what the cell will typically do is attempt to repair that break. It has several mechanisms it can use to put the DNA back together. But it's really important it not do that at a normal chromosome end, because if you take two telomeres and you put them together, you create a chromosome that has two centromeres that is now going to get just ripped apart when the cell tries to divide. So my lab is actually interested in how a cell distinguishes between a telomere, which is a natural, normal end of a DNA molecule, and a double-strand break, which is an abnormal end of a DNA molecule that happens when a chromosome breaks. And the cell needs to treat those two types of end very differently. So my lab's interest in this intersection between normal chromosome ends and broken chromosome ends has implications in tumor formation or in cancer, because one of the things that frequently occurs in cancer cells or in cells that are going to become cancer cells are changes in the genome, mistakes in the genome, and double-strand breaks that are inappropriately repaired are one of the really common mistakes that occurs. And so in trying to understand the mechanisms that, or what happens during repair of these double-strand breaks, we're studying in many ways what happens in tumor cells.
I have to say, wow, again. There could potentially be a link between telomeres, aging, tumors, and just the basic functioning of life. After talking to Dr. Friedman, it does seem a little far-fetched that YouTube shows and binaural beats could have the whole truth about telomeres. In fact, Dr. Friedman's research exists because we don't even 100% know everything about the telomeres yet, so it'll be a long time before we can declare telomeres the fountain of youth. If you want to be a person who continues to unravel the potential behind telomeres, maybe it's time you also track down a scientist.